Hey guys, and welcome back to another day of Halloween week. For today's video, we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Steven Craig Damman. Steven Damman was born December 15th, 1952 to Marilyn and Jerry Damman. The family was originally from Iowa, but because Jerry was in the Air Force, they later moved to Long Island, New York. Soon after this move, they had their second child, Pamela. October 31st, 1955, 2-year-old Steven and 7-month-old Pamela went to the local grocery store about 1.5 miles away from their home with their mother. While Marilyn went into the shop to buy some bread, she left Pamela in her carriage and Steven standing next to the carriage on the sidewalk. Now today that sounds probably like the most insane thing you've ever heard, but in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, this was actually quite common. The carriages in this time were very large and clunky and hard to move, and the shops were very small. So it was very, very common for women to leave their children in their carriages, sleeping quietly on the sidewalk, lined up on the block, until they came back out to retrieve them. It was even common to leave the strollers outside of doctor's offices and even their homes sometimes. At this time, babies were thought to need the most amount of sunlight possible, and the natural air was thought to help them develop well and to grow up to be healthy children, so they left them outside. Also, it helped that mothers didn't perceive every possible danger to their children like we do now, and honestly, crimes against children weren't all that common back then. Marilyn said she went inside the shop for about 10 minutes, came back out, and the stroller was gone. Thankfully, Pamela was later found, still in her stroller, perfectly fine, around the block by a family member. However, even after a massive search with the help of the U.S. Air Force of about 1,000 people, Steven Damman was never found. About a month after Steven's disappearance, the family did receive multiple letters demanding large amounts of money for the safe return of Steven. However, these were later to be found to be hoaxes by a local college student who saw the story on the news and thought he could use it as a way to make some extra cash. Police didn't have very much or really any information to go on, and soon the investigation fizzled out and the family decided to move back home to Iowa. Later, Mary and Jerry did divorce, and I saw some accounts this divorce was mainly because of Marilyn's temper. There have been many theories in this case about what could have possibly happened to Steven Damman. And since there really isn't very much information about this case, I thought I would spend the majority of this video going into some of these theories. The first theory is probably the most obvious. Someone with nefarious intentions came across the children and decided to take them. I could imagine that they decided to take the children as a spur-of-the-moment decision and later, for some reason, decided to leave Pamela behind without harming her, possibly because she was young enough to not remember the ordeal. There's also the idea that maybe Steven was taken for a family who wanted a son desperately enough to do anything. There's always the obvious idea that this was possibly the crime of some sort of deranged person wandering the streets or a child predator with male preferences. However, since it is unlikely that either of these types of people would have been able to conceal Steven for this long, I have to assume that we have to cross this off the list of plausible theories. There were rumors I found online of Marilyn possibly being abusive. These were spread by supposed neighbors of the Damman family. The claim was substantiated mainly by the fact that Steven had a healed fracture on his arm, which police actually used this fact to decide if a child they found was Steven or not. After searching for quite a while, I really couldn't find any sort of explanation of this fracture. Nobody in the family really came forward to say, oh, he just fell or something like that. And I think that really leads a lot of people to believe that maybe this whole stroller going missing story was just a lie made up by Marilyn to conceal an awful accident. Some people online also pointed out that toddlers have a proclivity to wandering off and getting themselves into situations that they can't necessarily get themselves out of. Perhaps Steven got bored and decided he wanted to go on a walk and took his sister's stroller with him. And maybe he eventually got bored or tired and decided to leave her stroller behind to continue to investigate something nearby or just to continue to walk. However, thinking about strollers and the size of them in this time period, I think this is kind of a stretch. Strollers were, like I said, quite heavy and weren't easy to push, and they were very clunky and tall, and I just don't see how a 2-year-old would have been able to push this by himself down the road without anybody noticing. One of the main early theories was that Steven was possibly the boy in the box. If you aren't familiar with this case, the boy in the box happened in Philadelphia in 1957. A young boy aged 4 to 6 was found murdered in a park. He was wrapped in a plaid blanket and stuffed inside of a cardboard box of a baby bassinet that was sold at JCPenney at this time, just 2 years after Steven went missing. This child was severely malnourished, water-wrinkled, and was covered in bruises. Steven and this child had a striking amount of similarities physically. Some investigators even said that they would have called them twins if they had seen them side by side while alive. Both boys were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, of the same relative height and weight, with similar scars and birthmarks. You see, Steven had a scar under his chin and a birthmark on the back of his right leg, which looked like a mole. And the boy in the box had the exact same markings. However, in 2003, DNA conclusively said that Steven Damman was not the boy in the box. The boy has never been identified, has never been claimed, and although police have tested his DNA numerous times over the years, they have never had any real leads in this case. In 2009, the case of Steven Damman was forced back into the spotlight after a 29-year-old man, John Barnes, came forward saying that he believed he was Steven Damman. You see, John Barnes said that his mother had made some suspicious claims on her deathbed that made him fear that he was not his parents' biological child. However, after testing his DNA against Pamela's, it was decided that he and Pamela did not share the same mother. Steven's case remains unsolved to this day. As always, I will list all of my sources down below in the description box as well. And if, as always, I missed any information, please leave it in the comments. I hope you guys are enjoying Halloween week, and I'll catch you in tomorrow's episode.